Now, with certain players in history becoming so legendary, some notable names even have unbreakable records that you won't believe. Now, during this past season, everyone was talking about legends exiting the game like Dwayne Wade and Dirk Nowitzki retiring. But with this taking place, many overlooked Jamal Crawford crashing Dirk's final game ever, while Jamal actually played with the Suns. During that game, Jamal actually came off the bench as usual against the Mavericks, where he actually set an NBA record that will no doubt be held for a long time. In that game, Crawford went 18 for 30 from the field, and he dropped 51 points, which actually set the record for most points ever to come off the bench in a single game. Jamal also grabbed 5 rebounds and 5 assists, but that wasn't the only record that he set that night. He also became the oldest player to ever score 50 in a game. The previous record holder was none other than Michael Jordan, who actually dropped 51 points as well, but he was actually 38 years old, and at the time that Crawford set this, he was 39. But because of this game, Jamal also became the first player in league history to have 50 points for 4 different teams, which is why he's considered one of the best 6 men in history. Now, after the game, Jamal actually talked about his crazy performance, and he said, "My teammates were finding me. Coach was drawing up great plays, and I just had to get lost in the game. My teammates, like I said, I can't talk about them enough. It's never about me, it's about those guys. It's a collective effort." Jamal also talked about being the oldest player to ever score 50 points in a game when he was on the Jeremy Mills podcast. And he said, "That night, 25 was like the number. I had that at the end of the third, so then the fourth starts. I scored 12 immediately. I'm at like 37, 38 with like 9 minutes to go. That's the first time I'm like, oh, this is a 50-point night. That was unbelievable, the oldest player to ever do it. Before me, it was Michael Jordan, best player ever. It's never been done off the bench. I didn't even think it was possible. I just didn't think it was enough time." Jamal Crawford's teammate Devin Booker even reacted to this crazy game on Twitter saying OG can go. But with Jamal somehow continuing to be a free agent today, if this was in fact his final NBA game ever, then it's the most points scored in a player's last game ever since Kobe Bryant's ridiculous 60-point performance just a few years back. Now, back in January of 2015, at the time, the Warriors were just starting their infamous run of dominating the Western Conference, but Klay Thompson did the unthinkable, quickly putting the world on notice of what was really going on. Many know that Klay can be one of the best shooters of all time when on fire, and on January 23rd that year, Klay went out and had a quarter of his career where he shot 13 for 13 from the field, 9 for 9 on threes, and he scored 37 points in the third quarter and outscored the entire Kings team by 15 points himself. Klay went completely lights out and put on a performance that the NBA hadn't seen since Wilt Chamberlain scored 31 and a quarter over 50 years beforehand, and that was in March of 1962 when the NBA was completely different. But the only person in recent years to even come close to this record is Kevin Love, who scored 34 in the first quarter against Portland in November of 2016, where he shot 11 for 14 from the field and 8 for 10 from 3. But after this Klay Thompson record performance, he talked about this and said, "I can't believe I own an NBA record. God is good. I'm so blessed to be here and healthy. Hopefully it stands for a long time. That was crazy. I don't know what happened. I've never shot like that." After this took place, many NBA players around the league reacted to the news of Klay's historic third quarter. And some fans even joked on Twitter that the only way that they've seen someone score 37 in a single quarter was on 2K putting the difficulty to rookie. But players around the league had a lot to say on Twitter, including Paul George. He tweeted, "Klay had that 2K perfect release on them boys." Paul Gasol even said 37 points in the third quarter is just insane. Ricky Rubio tweeted, "No way you got 37 points in a quarter, oh my lord." Legendary Dirk Nowitzki even said, "Wow, Klay." And lastly, even his Splash Brother teammate Steph Curry gave praise where it was due, tweeting, "Still in shock. This guy Klay Thompson was unreal tonight, 37. But this record right here wasn't the only one that Klay Thompson set in his career. Just a few years later, Klay topped a 3-point record that stood for quite a long time. It was originally held by Kobe Bryant, who set the standards high at 12 3-pointers in a single game back in 2003, and was eventually tied by Donyell Marshall in 2005. The record stood for over a decade, until Steph actually broke the record hitting 13 in a ridiculous performance against the Pelicans. But recently, Klay Thompson of course broke this record as well, hitting 14 in a game against the Bulls back in 2018, and he even had to break out the headband during the second half as soon as he knew that this was actually possible. After Klay hit the 14 threes along with 52 points, he talked about this ridiculous night and said, "I just knew I was due for a big night. I just knew it. I don't know if I would have been able to break the records I've got in my past just like tonight, without the system that I play in, or the team I'm with, or the guys I play with. Because they knew even before I went out for the second half." Steph looked at the box score and said, "Go get it." And that just shows you the unselfishness that's within him. Now, after Klay surpassed his teammate Steph's record, Curry himself even talked about this, but he wasn't mad at all. He said, "It was like a pitcher throwing a no-hitter. Like, you don't really mention anything to him. It's kind of just everybody else figuring out ways we're going to keep feeding him the ball, and running our offense to obviously cater to him to knock down shots. Records are obviously meant to be broken. I'm just happy it's my teammate, and nobody else, and I got to witness it in person." Now, over the years, obviously Dwight Howard's become a player that's often been criticized for not living up to his superstar potential ever since he left Orlando. But in January of 2012, while still dominating with the Magic, he set an NBA record that doesn't look to be broken anytime soon. During this game, Dwight set the record for most free throw attempts ever taken in a single game when he shot a ridiculous 39 times. Around this time period, many teams use this hack-a-shack method, and it's basically to purposely foul poor free throw shooters, most of the time big men, force opposing teams to either have their big man shoot free throws, which would cause them to either score 1 or even 0 points, while taking no time off the clock, which would help the team fouling to make a comeback possible. But although taking it to this extreme of fouling Howard that many times in one game, the Warriors continued to hack him, and with Howard being known as a notoriously bad shooter from the free throw line, out of the 39 attempts, he only made 21, but he still finished the game with 45 points and 23 rebounds, and they ended up beating the Warriors anyways. After the game, Howard actually talked about the situation going down, and he said, "I just tried to be aggressive and get to the line. I didn't care if I missed 30. I was still going to go up there and shoot the next one with confidence." Coach Van Gundy also spoke about the performance afterwards, saying, "I'm looking at them like we're not going to run a play. He's going to foul him. What are we going to bother with diagramming a play? Make the free throw, play some defense." And Magic teammate JJ Redick at the time even joked after the game saying, "It's amazing that he even made 21. Now the following year in 2013, after Dwight was traded to LA, he actually set a record with the Lakers team surrounding this as well, when teams continued using this method of intentionally fouling him. And he had a game against his former Orlando team making 25 free throws of 39 attempts. But more recently, present day Anthony Davis being traded there, he actually had a ridiculous performance as well, topping this record, but unintentionally. He dropped 40 points and 20 rebounds in just 3 quarters of play, and during that game, he made 26 of 27 free throws. Teams don't typically use this infamous hack-a-shack method any longer on big men, due to a few reasons. 1. Big men aren't as bad as shooters as they used to be, and the elites in today's league actually have expanded their game even as far back as the 3-point line. And 2, it drastically slows the game down, so teams don't really see the need because of the tempo change in today's league. Many teams have resorted to quicker possessions and more 3-point attempts, so these records most likely won't be broken anytime soon as long as the game stays like this or continues to evolve even further. Now with Bill Russell creating a legendary legacy around winning, most people forget just how dominant he actually was when they don't include him in conversations of greatest players of all time. Many underestimate Russell mainly because of an era in which he played, around the very beginning of the NBA. But regardless, he still put up some of the most ridiculous numbers of all time. 15 points, 4 assists, and a ridiculous 22 rebounds per game throughout his entire career, and only being one of 2 players to grab 50 rebounds in a game. But with all of that being said, no doubt the most unbelievable part of Bill's resume has got to be his historic finals runs with the Celtics, which happened to be the greatest stretch of winning in NBA history. Between the years of 1957 and 1969, the Celtics were in the finals every year except 58, when they lost to the St. Louis Hawks, and 1967 when they didn't make the finals. The dominance of Bill Russell in Boston during this time has since been unmatched in any sport, with the Celtics going 11-1 in the biggest stages during these years, and 11 championships for Bill Russell. This record is so unbeatable that it hasn't even been done in any other sport. Closest being Yogi Berra winning 10 World Series in the MLB around the same time period, but present day, closest player in the NBA we've even seen come close to making it to the biggest stage of the NBA Finals that many times is LeBron James, where he made a ridiculous 8 finals in a row combined with Miami and Cleveland, but even he only managed to win 3 championships during that run. Now probably one of the most ridiculous records in NBA history is this one right here, and it'll for sure 100% never be broken. Back in 1999, Cal, who was a 6'10 forward for the Atlanta Hawks at the time, was in his 5th NBA start ever, and during this game, he recorded 7 fouls at one time. Now obviously the rule in basketball is 6 fouls and you're out of the game, but a freak accident actually happened here. During the course of the game, the scorer's table miscounted one of his fouls, and it led him to not being called out after he reached his 6th that game. After committing his 7th foul, then he finally fouled out, and after the game, it was actually determined that they missed a call, which made him the only player to ever have 7 fouls in a game. Now due to the technology and amount of refs on the court in today's NBA, this record is nearly impossible to be broken no matter how many fouls a player like James Harden may draw from opposing defenses. Now with Wilt Chamberlain being one of the most famous names in basketball after cementing himself in conversation as a top player to ever play, his dominance in the NBA during his era with the unbreakable records that he set continue to define his legacy today. In the 1961 season, Wilt averaged something that seems impossible, 48.5 minutes per game. Obviously a regulation game is 12-minute quarters, which amounts to 48 minutes for a full game, and if overtime is necessary, 5 minutes added on for each extra period. But what Wilt did was unbelievable during this year. Wilt averaged more than 48 minutes per game because not only did he try to play every single minute of every single game he played, games also went into overtime where he played those minutes as well. That year, Wilt played every minute except for 8 minutes in one game when he was actually ejected, meaning he played 99.8% of the minutes that entire season. The top 7 spots in minutes per game for a season is all held by Wilt, and nobody's even done anything close to this since Monte Ellis actually averaged 40 minutes per game during the 2010 season. Now outside of just playing an incredible amount of minutes, this playing time allowed Wilt to set many scoring records that don't even make sense. Between the years of 1959 and 1969, Wilt recorded a total of 118 games in which he scored 50 points or more. Nobody in the history of the league has even come anywhere close to this. Even Michael Jordan, being such a prolific scorer himself, is second place on this list of 50-point games, with just 31 in his career. During the 1961 season alone, Wilt had 45 50-point games, which is more than Jordan had his entire career. But during that historic season of Chamberlain's, Wilt averaged an unheard of 50.4 points per game, and nobody's even come close to averaging this either, other than Wilt himself averaging 44. But the most notable seasons of others was Michael Jordan averaging 37 points per game in 1987, and James Harden recently putting up 36 points per game in 2019. But the most notable record of Wilt's is what all basketball fans know about, his ridiculous 100-point game. Despite there being little to no footage of this game even taking place, it happened, and nobody's come close to this record other than Kobe Bryant, who in January of 2006 went crazy against the Raptors, scoring 81. The next closest to that, Devin Booker in March of 2017 became the youngest player to ever drop 70 in a game. But interestingly enough, this record wasn't even something that Wilt's been proud of. A teammate of Chamberlain's at the time actually talked about this game and said, "The most important thing about that 100-point game was that he tried to come out of the game before he got 100. Coach wouldn't listen to him. Nobody would listen to him. We said we wanted to get him the ball and he would say, 'I'll get mine, don't worry about me.' When he scored 100 points, he was probably the least excited about it. We were in the locker room going crazy. I never thought I'd take 63 shots, but we all said, 'Wilt, you scored 100 points.'" But interestingly enough, this record's actually been broken in basketball. College player Jack Taylor actually had a night where he scored 138 points, took 108 shots, and made 27 threes. This happened a few years back in 2012, and without a doubt, these records will never be touched. Hey you, see this video right here? You won't believe what the NBA will look like in 2021. What are you still doing here? Click right now, I'll see you there.